The whole thing started with an image that I made for, there's a collection that I heard about of the gentleman who has a collection of all based on the human hand. And I made this print for him for his collection, Henry Buell. It's in that collection now. I made this print, which is a version of this gesture. And that kind of started the whole thing. This, of course, I introduced into Star Trek as a Vulcan greeting. But it actually comes from a religious experience that I had when I was about 8 or 9 years old in the synagogue during the high holiday services when the priests of the Hebrew tribes, they're called Kohanim, blessed the congregation. In English, the translation is, may the Lord bless you and keep you, may the Lord cause his countenance to shine upon you, may the Lord turn his graciousness unto you and grant you peace. Well, when they're saying that, they use this gesture, both hands pointed at the audience, at the congregation. And I remember my father said to me, don't look. And everybody's got their eyes covered or their heads covered with their prayer shawls. But I snuck a peek. I was 8 years old. And I saw these gentlemen doing this. And I was fascinated by it. I learned how to do it. I didn't know what it meant. This is the shape of a Hebrew letter, which is the letter Shin. It makes the SH sound in the Hebrew alphabet. And that letter is the first letter in the word Shaddai, which is a name for the Almighty. So the idea is they're blessing the congregation or using a symbol of God's name as they bless the congregation with their hands out like that as they say this prayer. And they're chanting it and they're shouting it. It was really very theatrical and very passionate. And it made an impression on me. So I kept that in my mind, not really understanding what it was all about. Later I learned that this was the shape of the letter Shin, but it took me a long, long time to find out why you're not supposed to look. And I asked this question of our rabbi, must be 8 or 9 years ago, and he said, you're not supposed to look because the belief is that when they say that prayer and they use that gesture, they are summoning the Shekhinah, which is the feminine aspect of God, and she comes into the sanctuary to bless the congregation. And if you see her, it could be very damaging because the light, the power of her presence could be fatal. You could die at worst, and at least be injured. So people cover their eyes. I peeked and I survived. But when I heard that story, I was fascinated with that. I thought, that's a wonderful spiritual idea, you know. And I began to explore the possibility of expressing that in photographs. The first thing I did was, here's an image, another version of it with the human hands, obviously, and the two-handed version. Then I began to experiment. I was shooting a female figure at the time, and I began to experiment with lacing in the letter Shin into some of these images. This is a Shin here, this is a Shin on her arm. So I began to introduce that letter into some of these early images that I had. And then I began to branch out from there. From the time that I decided that I was going to work on the Shekhinah idea to the time that we had a book was about 3 years. Pretty intense project. It took a lot of work.